So this whole sub 250 gram micro drone category has really taken off over the past couple of years, with all of these drone manufacturers rushing in to try and make their version of a mini drone that weighs under 250 grams. The reason that that weight is so important is because most countries don't require you to register to fly your drone if it falls under a certain weight, usually being 250 grams. Now the Autel Nano and the Mini 3 Pro here both weigh under 250 grams, meaning here in the United States, you do not need to register with the FAA in order to fly them. You still have to follow all the rules and regulations, but you don't need to register, kind of making them more accessible for the masses, right? You don't need to go through the process of actually registering. Now that was never an issue to me. I do a lot of commercial work, so I've got my 107, I fly larger drones on the regular, so having a smaller drone wasn't necessarily appealing to me for the reason of not having to register. But on a recent trip up to Ottawa, I was unable to fly a drone over 250 grams outside of that micro category because I did not hold my advanced pilot certificate up there in Canada. This meant that I needed to look at my smaller drones to bring with me that fell into that micro drone category so that I could capture some aerial photos and videos for a project that I was working on. And out of the two options here on the table, I chose the Mini 3 Pro because it is flat out better. Now, when I compare different drones, I always think of the 5 pillars or categories that make up a drone. These are the aircraft performance and build, the camera, the transmission, the remote controller, and the built-in flight features. These are the most important things that make up a great drone. Before we dive into the specifics, I just want to quickly conduct a blind test. If I told you that, say, drone A was fundamentally better in each of these categories than drone B, which would you choose? Probably drone A, right? Well, in this case, drone A is the DJI Mini 3 Pro and drone B is the Autel Nano Plus, meaning that the Mini 3 Pro across the board is just fundamentally a better drone. Now, the Nano Plus is good at playing catch up, right? It's right there on the Mini 3 Pro's heels, but the one thing that really separates these two drones for me is the fact that the Mini 3 Pro is better, but it's also less expensive than the Nano Plus. We'll get more into the pricing towards the end of this video, but I find it bizarre that the better drone is less expensive. Like, I could justify the Nano as being a good option if it was half the price or maybe even 3/4 of the price. It could be a good budget option, but the fact that it's more expensive just totally doesn't make any sense. So bringing up those 5 pillars has given us a good way to break this video up into sections to put these two drones head to head, with the first being the aircraft itself. So this covers the design and the performance. From a design standpoint, these two drones are so similar that I really can't say that one is better than the other for any massive reason, but there are a few small points I figured I'd mention that make me favor the Mini 3 design over the Nano Plus's design. First is the general body shape. I feel like the Mini 3 just looks cooler. It's almost like a spaceship. While it isn't something that will make a difference when actually flying, it's just a personal preference that I have. The next is the way the drones sit on the ground. The Nano Plus rests on its arms, and being a sub 250 gram drone, it's obviously going to be a little bit more flimsy. The Mini 3 Pro, however, sits on the body of the drone and has little rubber feet for protection and grip. This is just a small example of the better build quality that the Mini 3 Pro has over the Nano. Now, while both of these drones feature the same level of obstacle avoidance with sensors on the front, the bottom, and facing backwards, these two systems are not the same. Look at how small and beady these obstacle avoidance cameras are on the Nano Plus compared to the larger lenses of the Mini 3. These things almost look like the eyes on a frog. This has led to an overall better flight experience with my Mini 3 Pro, and it also makes this drone more reliable. I mean, I've had a lot of situations with my Nano Plus when I'm out in the middle of the open, like just flying in the sky, and the drone thinks there's something in front of it and it slams on its brakes. Also, vice versa. I've been near objects, it doesn't know that it's there, and it lets me get insanely close until it throws on the brakes at the last second. So overall, the obstacle avoidance is a lot more trustworthy here on the Mini 3 Pro. A small design element that I've really come to like on the Nano Plus is the fact that it has the battery LEDs on the battery itself. So when I pull a battery out of my bag, I can check really quickly to make sure it actually has a charge. The battery indicator on the Mini 3 Pro, however, is instead on the drone itself. So I find myself popping a new battery in only to find out that it's already been used, and then I have to grab a new one. It's a small inconvenience, but just something I figured I'd mention. Now, as for the biggest difference in design here between both of these drones, it's actually in the gimbal and camera assembly, where the Mini 3 Pro offers a brand new design that really gives you a fresh take on how to capture aerial photos and videos. The Nano Plus features the typical 3-axis gimbal drone design that hangs underneath of the body, and there's really no issue with that. It's been used on drones for almost a decade and works just fine. The Mini 3 Pro is unique though in a sense that the camera can rotate vertically, which with the push of a button on the remote. This means that you can capture portrait photos and videos as well as the traditional landscape images that we're used to. No matter which orientation you use, the general design of the gimbal is flat out better because of the upwards gimbal pitch. On the Nano Plus, you're restricted by the body of the drone, but with the camera on the Mini 3 Pro being positioned more on the front of the drone, it has a much greater range of motion with the ability to look upwards 57 degrees. So yeah, the design is very identical. I would say that each of them have their own nuances that make them special and a little bit better in their own separate ways, but overall I'd go with the Mini 3 Pro as the winner in this regard because of the new gimbal design and the better obstacle avoidance. Where the Mini 3 Pro really starts to pull ahead though is when you look under the hood at the specs and what these drones are actually capable of. There are some areas where the improvements are very small, like the slight edge in the speed and the range, but the biggest difference that really makes an impact on everyday flying is the flight time. It becomes a little bit tricky to compare even that though, because the Mini 3 has two different types of batteries. There's the standard battery that keeps the drone under the 250 gram weight limit, and there's the Plus battery that, while increasing your flight time, also pushes us over that weight threshold. In this case, when comparing the flight time between both of these drones, it can be a little bit unfair if we account for the extended battery, but when we look at the Mini 3 Pro's standard battery that keeps it under 250 grams, it still has a longer advertised flight time of 34 minutes compared to the Nano Plus's 28 minutes. Now, usually I'm getting about like 75 to 80% of that actual number, so the Nano Plus is around 22 minutes, while the Mini 3 Pro here is more like 32 minutes, but still, you're getting a lot more flight time out of the Mini 3 Pro, and you know what? I just like the fact that they even offer the ability to use an extended battery if you want, if you don't care about the weight and you've registered with, say, the FAA so that you can fly heavier drones. The fact that they even offer that is great because being able to fly for over 40 minutes on one battery is truly incredible. Now, in terms of the handling of the drone, I really have to give Autel props. I have hated how their drones fly in the past. This clip that you're watching here is from the Autel EVO II, and as you can see, it is just randomly kicking to the left. It is all over the place. I have always praised DJI drones for their flight characteristics, and while I think the Mini 3 is smoother in the air and on the sticks, the Nano is right there behind it with a good flight experience. Okay, so enough about the drones themselves. Now moving into what some people would argue is the most important category, and that is the camera. On paper, the Mini 3 Pro has an edge in basically every regard except for the overall photo resolution, as the Nano Plus has the slightest edge with the 50 megapixel sensor. The video settings, in my opinion, propels the Mini 3 Pro a little bit further ahead, as we have the ability to shoot 4K video at 60 frames per second and shoot slow motion footage when capturing 1080p video at 120 frames per second. The bitrate is also higher, giving us an overall higher fidelity video file that looks better and gives us more flexibility to edit in post. Now we have to discuss the RYYB sensor in the Nano Plus because it is different than the traditional RGB sensor found in basically every other drone on the market. The difference here is that the RYYB sensor captures red, yellow, and blue light to capture your image compared to red, green, and yellow. This is said to produce better looking images in low light, but I think the jury is still out on that one. Now, personally, the way that I like to compare cameras is take these same exact photos and videos and then bring them in and look at them side by side, right? I mean, look, the specs are great to look at. You want to know the numbers, you want to know the strengths, the weaknesses, the limitations of a camera, and in this case of a drone. But the best way to compare them is to look at the images side by side. But honestly, that just makes it even harder to determine which one is better because the footage and the photos look so similar right out of the camera. Now, personally, if I had to say like the one difference I noticed right off the bat, I feel like the Mini 3 Pro's photos and videos look more bright, like they look like they're more inviting, and maybe it has a little bit of better dynamic range, but regardless, the images coming out of both these drones are very, very similar, that it puts them at a very close tie in my book. I will have these available for download in the description through Dropbox if you want to download them for yourselves. Go ahead and bring them on your computer, edit them, and actually see them in their full resolution to really see which one you prefer when making your decision. Now, if I had to choose a winner, right, between these two drones, even though the specs are so similar, and even though the images look fairly similar coming out of the camera despite minor differences, and honestly, it probably comes down to personal taste at that point depending on which one you think produces the better files, I'd have to give the win to the Mini 3 Pro just on the fact that it has the updated gimbal design. It's so much more fluid, it's so much more flexible, and of course rotates to capture portrait photos and videos. Some people might think, oh, I never want to capture it in the vertical aspect ratio, and look, I totally understand that, but just know that you've got a lot more flexibility with this gimbal design as you have so much more room to pitch the camera and gimbal upwards. Now, the third pillar that makes a good drone is the transmission system. And personally, I probably should have put this at number one because it's the most important thing. Like, what is a good drone if you don't have a strong signal between the controller and the drone itself? I mean, at that point, if you can only fly it 500 feet away, what is the point of even flying it? So having a nice strong transmission system really is important, and honestly, DJI and Autel are two of the best in the game. They deliver the best overall flight experience because their transmission systems are so good. For example, looking outside of these two drones that we're talking about, the Skydio 2 Plus comes with two antennas that fold upwards for increased range, but the signal still really isn't that great. The range isn't anything special, and the connection between the remote and drone, even at close distances, can be really shaky. Now, to Autel's credit, as I've mentioned, their transmission system is right up there with DJI's, giving you a great overall flight experience. There's very little lag, it barely drops frames, and the range is all that you would need and more. I mean, getting up to 6 miles out of a tiny drone really is extra. I still think that the O3 transmission system in DJI's Mini 3 is superior with better range, not that you would really need it, but it also has a stronger signal at closer distances, making it just a little bit better. This category is usually a blowout in favor of DJI, so the fact that both of these drones have a great transmission system is awesome to report back because it just makes that overall flight experience better. Like, again, if you don't have a strong signal from your drone to the remote controller and you can't fly out past 500 feet, then what's the point of even flying at all? Now, moving away from the drone itself, I am an absolute sucker for a good remote controller, and with this release, Autel finally ditched their old dated design with the built-in screen. This is a remote that I have hated ever since the EVO 1, so to see a new design is really refreshing. If I had to describe the feel in the hands, it's very identical to an Xbox remote controller, but with nice rubber grips where you rest your palms. This puts the buttons in a really good spot to be pressed mid-flight, and the sticks are really smooth. This remote, plus the great transmission system, makes for an overall awesome flight experience, but if I had one complaint, it's that there's literally no place to put the sticks when you screw them off. You kind of just have to throw them in your bag or your pocket, which is a recipe for disaster. Now, if you couldn't already tell, the theme of this video is like, hey, the Nano Plus is a good drone, but the Mini 3 Pro is there to one-up it in basically every single way, and the remote controller is no excuse, as DJI allows you to connect 3 separate types of controllers to the Mini 3 Pro, whichever one suits your style. Now, the newest controller that's compatible with the Mini 3 Pro is the DJI RC, and it's quickly become one of my favorite ways to fly a drone. It feels really great in the hands, the built-in screen is plenty bright at 700 nits, and best of all, I don't have to use my phone to fly, so no more notification spam, no more dim iPhone screen in the heat, and no more draining my battery unnecessarily. DJI also gives you the option to use their RC N1 remote controller, which we have seen shipped with their drones for years now. Like Autel's remote, you also need to use your phone, which is held in that top clamp. This remote is just a little blockier, but still offers a comfortable feel in the hands. And finally, the RC Pro has also been made compatible with the Mini 3 Pro if you want the best possible flight experience. That, in my opinion, is the best controller without a doubt. All right, so I figured now would be a good time to jump in here and discuss price, and this is where things start to get really ugly. I'm gonna put all the price points of all the different bundles up here on the screen, and yes, you're reading that right. The Autel Nano Plus for the same equivalent bundle as the Mini 3 Pro is $200 more. That means that both of these drones come with the stock remote controller, and if you thought that that was crazy, you could also buy the upgraded bundle with the DJI RC with the built-in screen for less money than the standard Autel Nano Plus kit. To me, that is just absolutely bizarre, the fact that you can get a better drone for less money. Now look, they are always running sales. Sometimes the Mini 3 Pro is less expensive, sometimes the Nano is less expensive. I'm going based on what these drones are priced at directly on their website. So this is coming directly from Autel's website and coming directly from DJI's website, and the price point isn't even close. And I think that right there probably tells you all you need to know about which of these drones is the right buy for you. Now, the final thing that I want to bring up here, and I'm going to make it brief, is the feature set in both of these drones. They're very identical. Each of them have similar types of modes, just with different names. So for example, the one that most people are going to be interested in is the tracking flight mode. So it would be active track in the Mini 3 Pro and dynamic track in the Autel Nano Plus. Now, overall, I think it's great to see that these intelligent flight modes are making their way down to the lesser expensive drones, because I think a lot of people want to take advantage of the drone actually flying by itself and tracking them. Personally, I have gotten way better results with my Mini 3 Pro, and it all goes back to the fact that it just has a more reliable obstacle avoidance system. It's able to make more fluid movements as it's dodging obstacles, which ends up giving me better looking video. And I also feel like I can just trust the Mini 3 more. Like, I can ride my one wheel with the Mini 3 following me, and I don't need to look back 10 times every minute to make sure that it's still there. I mean, active track in DJI's drones has gotten really good, whereas dynamic track is just kind of the same as it's always been. All right, so guys, there's everything that you need to know about how these two drones stack up against each other. Again, if it's my choice, I'm going Mini 3 Pro all day long, but that doesn't mean the Autel Nano Plus is a bad drone. Like, in a vacuum, if this only existed, I think it's a great drone, but the fact that I can compare it to a drone that's less expensive and that's better, it's just tough for me to recommend the Nano Plus. With that said, feel free to let me know your thoughts on these two drones down in the comment section below, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.